Hello and welcome to Ladies Corner with T. She's a lot of things to many people. She's a writer, she's a communications expert, she's a columnist. Most importantly, she's Sarah Mushtaq, and she joins us on Ladies Corner to talk about faith, to talk about religion, and to talk about equalities because that is one of the main things that you do. So I want to welcome you warmly to Ladies Corner tonight, and I want to say thank you. It's 2 hours ahead. You're in Windsor, posh Windsor, and we're right here in Alberta at 7:47. Thanks for coming on the show.
Thanks for having me. Excited to be here.
Absolutely. Could you please tell us a little bit about yourself? Could you give our audience a little introduction to the life and world of Sarah?
Sure. I'll try to be as brief as possible, but I am from Windsor here in Ontario. We moved here when I was 10 from the States, so we actually just hopped over the border when we moved here to Canada. And we have been in Windsor ever since. That's where we moved, and we just kind of stayed here. So I went to school here, went to university here as well, did my MBA, and then I've been working in healthcare since in administration there. And then on the side, just doing a bunch of other things, always staying busy. As you mentioned, I write a monthly column for the Windsor Star. And then as well, just a lot of community outreach work and whatnot. So just staying active and involved and trying to make our community a better place.
Mm. I mean, that's really good, and we cannot keep busy enough. I was just wondering, what has been the role of relationships in all that you do with the city of Windsor or the Windsor Regional Hospital? Do you feel your achievement so far has been because of favor with man or blessing from God or your shared dexterity and intelligence? How would you attribute your rise in life?
Yeah, I mean, I think you can tell from my appearance that I am Muslim. And so it's definitely like faith is a huge part of this. We definitely believe that, everything comes from God. So anything that I have been able to accomplish, of course, there's work involved with that. But first and foremost, like it is something that I believe to be, to come from God. And I'm grateful for that. And if something doesn't happen, that's, also a lesson. So that doesn't say not to do the work and not to put in the work, but that's definitely something that I really believe in, having faith and then also doing the work. And that's something I've been, lucky and fortunate enough to kind of see the fruits of that in my life as well.
When we talk about faith, this is the fasting season, and I want to again appreciate because that thing is not easy from dusk to late in the day. It's not easy, and you're articulate. And what are the blessings of the Ramadan that most of us do not know? Because it's hard physically. You're trying to meet and fasting, you're
Yeah.
dizzy, much less a month long of observing this important religious activity. So tell us one of several blessings from this season, if you will, please.
Sure. I think the first one that we always have to kind of think of is that anything that we do in faith is for God. So that's kind of, you center fasting around that, it is hard, it's difficult, and some days you really don't want to. And other days it's easy and you really enjoy it. And no matter the kind of day you're having, it's just remembering that it's for the sake of God. So I think that's, kind of, you have to center it around that. The other thing is, yeah, some days you're really tired, especially when it was in the summer and the days were a little longer. Now it's getting a little easier because it is by the lunar calendar. So as we're moving backwards, so just figuring out a schedule and making it work. I will say with the pandemic, one of the things that's been hard is not having, kind of that communal aspect of during the day you're fasting, you're doing, if you're in school, you're at work, you're doing your own thing. But in the evenings, you'd be breaking your fast with community, with family, with friends. You would be going to the mosque for night prayers. So there was a lot, this big sense of community that, with the last year, that's really been missing. Which, again, that's there's a lesson in everything, and there's a test in everything. So, there's something that we're supposed to learn and gain from this as well. And so maybe it's encouraging us to do a lot of like individual growth and self-reflection that way. But I will say I definitely miss the sense of community for sure.
When we reflect on this pandemic, we see the hand of a higher power in the sense that it's global. And I just wonder, from your sense of theology, how you place the Almighty at the center of this pandemic. Does it show, how does it show his mercies, his tenderness, his kindness, or is this a sense of justice on the earth, this pandemic? Help us put this in perspective, if you can.
Yeah, I think one thing is it's definitely a reminder, because I do feel like it kind of jarred a lot of people and made them reflect on, what they want in life, what was important, what they have access to, what other people don't have access to. So you're reminded of your blessings, if you have your health, if you have a roof over your head, if you have your job, all of those things. And that a lot of people, don't have that. And so I think it's a reminder that, especially for those of us who are privileged enough to still have those things over the past year, to make sure that we're advocating and, making sure no one in our communities, going hungry or suffering in any kind of way. And that's a tall order. But I do think that that's probably one of the silver lining sort of lessons here, that it's reminding people that we aren't in this together always. And that there is a lot of inequity in our community, and that there's a lot to go around. There's a lot of blessings to go around. If you think about food in the world or even the vaccines, there's a lot in the world to go around. We just have to not necessarily be greedy or selfish, and make sure that the people who need it most can get it, and then share it with each other. I think that's also my like Ramadan talking a little bit here. Just thinking about, especially during fasting, like you're reminded during the day you're hungry and you think about all the things you can eat, and then when you finally go to eat, you can't eat that much because you haven't eaten all day. So it's just reminding that you don't need that much to survive and to live a good life. But and so all of those blessings and resources that you might have access to can easily be shared among so many other people.
Mm, mm. There's so many questions I want to expand, but I don't want us to run out of time. This week, maybe towards the end, I'll go back into the faith part, but we need to move on to consider other aspects of this chat. This week in America, Derek Chauvin was found guilty on all charges. First of all, I want to get your thoughts on what that did to you as a person, if it helped change the narrative, in your opinion, of injustice, of of police brutality against minorities. How did you analyze or understand the guilty verdicts?
Yeah, I think first of all, it was both wonderful to see and also sad that we were so shocked that the guilty verdict did come as a guilty verdict. And there's a really nice piece in BuzzFeed by culture critic Alamin Abdul Mahmoud that I would recommend about. It's called "To Convict Derek Chauvin, Prosecutors Couldn't Tell the Truth About America," and I really appreciated reading that because it had a lot of my feelings there. Of we all saw what happened. We saw the video. We saw 9 minutes of it. We know what happened, and so it is a little odd that we needed a court to tell us, yes, what you saw was real and true, and we agree with you. So there's that element there. Two other things I'll say on this is that it's an individual case. That doesn't necessarily mean any systemic changes have happened. So although we can celebrate that, the verdict came back as guilty here, there's still a lot of systemic work to do to make sure that there isn't further police brutality against racialized individuals or anyone for that matter. And then the second and last thing I'll say on this is that as Canadians, I think we, especially for someone like me, we live in a border town, so we get a lot of American news. But in general, as Canadians, we spend a lot of time looking at the US and not necessarily reflecting on what's happening here. So there's a lot of cases over the last few years, right? Like Abdurrahman Abdi, that was in Ottawa. Defonte Miller was in Toronto. Ijaz Chaudhry was in Toronto. Regis Krasinski Paquette, was in Toronto as well. So these were all people who were oftentimes racialized, either Black or Indigenous or otherwise racialized, and who faced some sort of police brutality right here in Canada. So I think we also need to look within ourselves and see how we can address this and make sure that it doesn't continue to be a problem here as well.
Would it be short-sighted of me to ask this question? Have you, as an hijabi, a practicing Muslim in Canada in 2021, experienced any form of backlash because of the way you choose the way you choose to express your faith? Would that be a narrow-minded question, or would that
Not
be
at all.
relevant today? All right.
Very relevant. I've definitely experienced it. My friends who are Muslim and or racialized, so either if they're just racialized or they are also wear hijab, they've experienced racism. It's definitely something that's here. So like I mentioned as well, that we sometimes look at other countries and think, oh wow, we can't believe that exists over there. We have Bill 21 here in Canada, right? That's in Quebec, preventing religious symbols in public funded areas like the government. So if someone wanted to be a teacher or a prosecutor, they couldn't do that because if they wore hijab, they wouldn't be able to do that. And then I know we connected shortly after a few of the incidents that happened in Alberta. So in Alberta, there were a string of incidents that were multiple Muslim women being attacked in public. So they were not just facing, like verbal harassment, they were facing actual physical assaults, which are often hate-based. So this is definitely a problem here in Canada, and it's definitely something we need to address. I just think that we sometimes, like I've mentioned before, we sometimes pretend it's not a problem here, and that's definitely detrimental to our ability to, first acknowledge that there's a problem and then address it and find some real solutions.
What would you say to people who say that women I'm sure you've heard this question as well before, that women in places like Saudi, some of them may not even want to wear, or in Afghanistan, I know I'm not pronouncing that country's name well, may not even want to wear the hijab, that women here might be under some sort of patriarchal domination, and that's why they carry on wearing it. What would you say to them? It's a free country. Why are women still wearing the hijab even when they don't have to? What is it that they are missing or not seeing from the religious significance of the hijab?
So that's exactly it, that it's a free country. And so if we believe in a free and democratic country and in feminist values that a woman should be able to dress as she pleases, that means that women who choose to wear the hijab should be allowed to wear it just as much as women who choose not to shouldn't be forced into wearing it. So you can't have it, one way or the other. If, again, there's also a little bit of this savior complex that kind of goes on with women overseas, that, we have to go to Afghanistan, we have to save these women from the big, bad, scary Taliban. And so, not to say that there aren't any issues in Afghanistan, of course there are, but that's a very narrow-minded and, oftentimes Orientalist point of view when we look at countries overseas. We're taking away the ability of women to make their own decisions and advocate for their own rights. So before we start, looking overseas and saying like, oh, but what about those women? I would say, let's look in our own backyard. We've legislated in this country, in Quebec, for women not to be able to dress as they please. So we're just doing the other side of the same coin, and that's not fair either to women. Yeah.
I've got two questions here. Do you kind of see the sentiment in Quebec spreading across to other provinces? Because I know the Islamophobia would have come from America with Trump, and then it's here, or maybe it's always been here. So I suppose what I'm asking is, what sort of education do we need to push out effectively to reduce this kind of microscopic understanding of the significance of the hijab?
Yeah, so one thing I'll push back on is that idea that racism came here because of Trump. Racism was always here, right? Like, ask anyone
No,
from
no,
day
no, no.
one.
I didn't mean racism. I meant this hatred against Muslim.
Yeah,
It made the forefront. It made it okay for people, I think, to hate on their fellow brothers and sisters and be all right with it. Before, people maybe used to hate discreetly, but then in Trump's time, it became no one cared. I think, we had the Proud Brothers, the Proud Boys,
yes, yeah,
all this
yeah.
white supremacist organization became forefront, and we had not seen that in a long time. That's just what I'm saying about Trump.
Okay, sorry about that. I take your point.
Mm.
Um, what I'll say about that again is that um, a lot of people my age, we came of age post 9/11. So our first instances with discrimination were in 2001, 2002, like around that time. So it's not something necessarily new. And then again, with people older than us, it's been happening many times over. In Europe, they're discriminating. There's lots of discriminatory legislation. Like in Sweden, recently passed a hijab ban. France has been flirting with hijab bans for years. So it is happening across the globe. I do, agree that someone like Trump was able to weaponize on that and really normalize that in a broader community context. He got to more people and people saw that he was saying it, so they felt more comfortable saying it. But that being said, I think a lot of people have these misconceptions about either Muslims or other people that they perceive to be Muslim. And that, quite frankly, comes from ignorance. There's a lot of good research in the States from Pew Research about religion and perception of religion. And oftentimes, a lot of that comes back saying that many Americans don't know a Muslim, or they don't know if a person's Muslim, or they don't have a Muslim friend, or something along those lines. And I'd say, like, the case is the same here in Canada as well. A lot of times we have our own networks, and this it goes for any community. You tend to be friends with or hang out with people that either look like yourself or have similar values or whatever else it may be. So I think there's a few things here is, diversifying your friend group or the circles that you hang out with. And that's not to say like, don't pick a token friend. Don't like, try to use someone to be that token person in your life. But then also I think our education system could be helpful here in making sure that we have effective cross-cultural education from a young age and interaction with other groups, as well as interfaith education as well. It's been such a blessing in my life to know people from different backgrounds, because I learn from them, and I by listening to their stories and their backgrounds, I learn both about them and about myself and my background. So I think that that's also important as well, making sure that the education is there and the tools to talk to other people and have these conversations are there as well.
Well spoken. When you project into the future, do you think that violence against racialized women will ever stop?
That's a tough question. um, I would like to be hopeful, especially in a month like Ramadan, where prayer is very important, emphasized. So I'd like to have hope, and I pray that that is the case. But that being said, there needs to be some serious actions in place before we can see that. we need to make sure that our leaders, condemn such acts, put in, legislation or other things that isn't discriminatory, making sure there are consequences for being hateful in public or to others. And then I think there is that like cultural community shift that needs to happen of, people interacting with each other and understanding where other people come from and their backgrounds. So, just saying that, it doesn't sound like a lot, but that's a lot of work that needs to be done before I think that'll happen. And unfortunately, I think sometimes things need to get worse before it can get better.
I want to address this issue of invisibility what I'm trying to say, feelings of not being seen. And as racialized women, I hear time and time again from college lecturers, professors, nurses across the spectrum that racialized women have to work double, work harder, stay longer, just maybe to be on the same path as their Caucasian colleagues. And my question is, do you sometimes feel that hijabis and Muslim women generally struggle with that notion of wanting to be seen, but they are not seen? Is this a relevant question? Is this perhaps what happens? Or your thoughts?
Yeah, I think it is a relevant question. And I don't want to generalize here. I should note that, people's experiences can vary quite differently depending on, how they were brought up or where they live. But I will say that racialized experience for sure, and the visible minority experience is there of always feeling like you have to prove yourself, especially if you come from an immigrant background as well. Trying to fit in, making sure you don't have an accent. If the color of your skin's different or your features are different or you dress differently, you try extra hard to, try to fit in some kind of way. And then I think that carries over to you as an adult of always trying to prove yourself. And we know that from data as well. Like with pay, we know racialized women get paid less. We know that racialized women are disproportionately represented in low paid and low skilled, and I use the term low skilled loosely, jobs. And we've seen that impact in the last year with the pandemic as well. A lot of these people were in frontline work like PSWs, and then they were more susceptible to getting sick and potentially, facing consequences from that as well. So I think that is hard to leave and hard to shake. And even if you think that you're not doing it, there's still that element. I, at least personally speaking, I feel like it always follows you, that you always feel like you kind of have to prove yourself. Especially, from the Muslim woman perspective as well. I'll add that, you're trying to make your community proud, but also fight back against stereotypes or biases about yourself, and say like, look, like we're not like this and we're not like that. That's not true, not incorrect. So I feel like you're always trying harder, and just fighting against so many misconceptions.
Thanks for that. I was just wondering, in what ways perhaps have you maybe felt stifled because A, of your gender, and B, because you're a hijabi? Does this happen to you?
Yeah, I mean, I think sometimes it's hard to prove, but it's definitely, people making comments. I was once at an open house where a woman made a comment about, Muslim women just getting married off and having kids, and like there was no hope for us, basically. And I was an undergrad at that time. And so it was like, no matter what you would say to her, she didn't believe you. So she just had this belief, and it didn't matter that she was speaking to a Muslim woman at that point. So I think it does happen, and sometimes you don't even realize that it's happening. Yeah, I feel like I could tell you many stories about that as well. Like there was one time I was at work, and there was someone, I was leaving work, and someone outside had said a comment like, I don't know what I had said, but I responded to them. And when I responded, he said, "Wow, I can't believe you speak English." And so there's, like a lot of assumptions that are made about people based on the way they look.
Mm.
And again, I think that's something that unfortunately a lot of people have to do work themselves to kind of break down those biases and stereotypes that they may have internalized without knowing.
Mm. Ouch. Sarah, I want you to, if you can, walk us through the sort of mental energy it takes to survive as a Muslim woman in Windsor in 2021. What sort of positive affirmations do you need to say to yourself every day? What sort of work do you need to do to keep abreast of the stereotypes and biases that are thrown your way every day?
Yeah, I will say that I've been very fortunate and blessed, I will say, and privileged that where I am currently, I haven't faced any super out there discrimination or assault like that. Although sometimes I think we kind of underplay some of the things people say to us. Um, but I will say what really weighs heavily is when you see these assaults, like for example, what's happening in Quebec or what happened in Alberta, or hearing stories from friends even here in Ontario of instances of discrimination they faced. And one of the ways that I've found helpful to kind of work through that is having a strong community and support group, so to speak. So friends that you feel like you can go to and talk to about it and say like, look, I heard about this. This makes me feel uncomfortable. It makes me feel sad or angry or whatever else, or scared. And having friends being willing to be there for you and support you. And I will say that these are friends who are both um, Muslim, whether they wear hijab or not, and then also non-Muslim. I've been really fortunate to kind of have that diverse friend group where I know whatever I need, that I can rely on them for that. So that's been really nice as well. And then, I mean, I know we were talking about faith as well, but faith is super important here for me. Um, and so it's just, always praying and having that conversation with God as well for making sure that we all stay protected. And you never want to see any sort of discrimination turn into hate. That's a physical assault happen to anyone. So always praying that we don't have any further incidents of that here.
Mm. Mm. In your line of work, how far are we away from equal pay for equal work?
So I'm actually not entirely sure about my own line of work. Um, I think that because I'm in the public sector, it is a little bit more standardized. So, like there's not as much of a disparity. But I think generally speaking, the Globe and Mail has this really good Power Gap series, which is focused on women. So there is a gap there that they don't really go further in and talk about racialized women. But the data they're able to pull is really, really telling, because we keep saying that, yeah, we're paying women the same, but the data keeps showing that, especially in large private corporations, that that's not happening. So I think we're still far from that. We need more data transparency and probably also government legislation to kind of enforce that.
Mm.
And then I will also add that when we talk about, we talked about, low wage, unskilled quote unquote work, I think there's really an important conversation there as well, because like I mentioned, a lot of women, often racialized, often, might be new immigrant, or even without status, are in those jobs, and those jobs definitely deserve more pay, as we've seen in the pandemic. They're doing a lot of work and keeping, the essential services open, but then they're also being paid quite equitably, if I can say that correctly, in comparison to jobs that have a higher representation of men. So my long answer, or my short answer here after the long answer, is that there's still a lot of work that we need to do. And I think that it's not only going to take, you know, corporations on their own to come together or governments to come together on this, but I think we're also going to need significant public pressure to force businesses and organizations and the government as well to say, like, look, like, this is not okay. We should have had equal pay yesterday, and let's make this a reality.
Mm. And many times when you want to make equal pay for equal work, in reality, the pushback are often from women. Do you often find a lot of the stumbling blocks in your career have come maybe from women who just do not get it?
So personally, no. I think I've been lucky maybe with my age group and like being relatively early on in our career where I've been around women who've been willing to share what they make because they understand that knowledge is power, right? So having that data and being clear about this job makes this much money. If you're interested in it, this is how much it makes, and so on, and being able to share that with, other people who might be interested in those jobs. So I think on a personal note, I've been fortunate in that sense, but I will 100% acknowledge that, it depends on the industry. It might depend on, the type of work. It might depend on the type of money that's being made, that there might be less of a willingness to share. And it might also depend on, right, like that organization's culture. So, if there's potential repercussions for sharing your salary, people might be less willing to share it. Or if they think that by sharing it, they're going to make less money if, the pay is equaled out. So I think it depends. There's a lot of factors there.
Mm, mm, mm. Oh, I see what you're saying. We run out of time. Is religion a barrier to liberalism and growth?
So again, this is something we could talk about for a while. I think it's hard to generalize here. So I'm going to reference Pew Research Poll again because they do a lot of this research on religion in the US, and there's parallels that you can apply to Canada. But you'll see that people who identify as with some kind of religion often have greater participations in civics, right? They're more likely to vote or, participate in the public government process in some way. They're more likely to volunteer. There's elements of faith, that encourage giving back, that encourage, feeding, that encourage charity. For example, Ramadan right now, charity is very much encouraged. So, like I said, I think it's hard to generalize. I think it depends a lot on leadership and the type of culture that's fostered. And if you're able to create a society that's inclusive and supportive of people from different backgrounds, I think you can see harmony of people from various religions or no religion at all, kind of living together and being able to, live their best life. But then you do see others where that is not necessarily the case. So I think it very much depends on the situation and the context.
I'm kind of curious. You are very articulate, and that's also come from your education. You are a coordinator, a marketer, and an effective communicator. What sort of books are you reading right now? What sort of books you read that forms your?
So I'm gonna say the last 10, 11 days it's Ramadan, so I haven't been reading fiction. It's encouraged right now to read the Quran, so that's kind of what's been the focus. But even that has been very slow, I will admit. So that's kind of been the focus right now. But I read a mix. I do like reading fiction to decompress. I do like a good rom-com, anything that can get to my heart. I have to give a shout out to Uzma Jalaluddin, who is a Toronto-based author, and she just had one of her new books come out, Hannah Khan Carries On. So that's on my desk as the next thing to read after Ramadan. So I do enjoy something like that. But I also read a lot of nonfiction. So I read the news every day. I like reading about history, about race, religion, and politics, really. So it's a little bit of a mix, but I will say consistently, I read the news every day. So I think that's probably where an element of that comes from.
Yeah, I think we have a lot in common. When you talk about race, religion, politics, the news, those are things that, if I can use the word, turn me on. that's just where I
Keeps
drift
us
now.
interested. Yes.
Yeah. And when you say rom-com as well, that lights a fire as well. Everyone needs some sort of rom-com.
We always need something light to decompress.
Once in a while, and I bet
Yeah.
you, okay. You're in Windsor, and before you go, can you tell us what people around you are experiencing in terms of the pandemic? How dark is it, or how light is it? Is it getting better?
So we've been fortunate right now in Windsor that we're kind of in this weird in between phase where we're not quite in the third wave, although the GTA and the rest of Toronto is really quite suffering. So it's a really difficult situation over there. But we're fortunate right now that our cases so far aren't super high here. But that being said, the entire province is, technically under lockdown. So I think one of the effects that's probably the same everywhere is that, there is a lot of, people are missing each other. There's this loneliness. People are tired of being inside. Like I mentioned, it's Ramadan, and I'm really missing going to the mosque and, being able to see people and like kind of socialize in those random, unplanned kind of settings. And I think that's the case everywhere. Um, and then I will say we'll see the effects of this later on. But Windsor does have a quite high child poverty rate. We do have a higher proportion of single parents in this area as well. So we were really affected by things like the 2008 recession. So I do worry about what's going to happen here locally with the pandemic as well. And that's probably already happening right now as we speak, with online schooling, with people not necessarily having access to community and resources that they may need. We've seen an influx of people needing food banks and things like that, homeless shelters. So I don't think that's unique to Windsor. I think that's, kind of across the board, but that's definitely something we're seeing here as well. But then on a positive note as well, I think a lot of people have discovered like our nature and our parks and, activities like that, and being able to kind of recenter a little bit there. Yeah.
Before you go, could you share where we can find you on social media? And secondly, could you maybe share in 30 seconds a deep reflection of something you have learned in this Ramadan season?
Okay, so I'll start with the social media because that one's easy. You can find me on Twitter, so just with my name, Sarah Mushtaq, or my handle, which is at Sarah Mushmush. So that's where I sometimes spend a little too much time that I shouldn't. My Ramadan reflection that I will share for now, I think I will repeat the one that I actually did mention earlier because I did feel that it was even more apparent this year of all those things that you kind of crave and desire during the day while you're fasting and you're hungry. Once you have access to them, you realize you don't need as much. So I think it's just a reminder of that, there's a lot that we have in our lives. There's a lot to go around and to share. And we're really a blessed, resourceful community here in Windsor, Ontario, and Canada, across the country. And there's going to be a lot of people who are going to need help, and we're going to have to do our best to make sure that no one gets left behind.
You've spoken wisely. You've spoken very well, Sarah. And I want to say thank you so much for coming on to Ladies Corner. I want us to do this again. So can I get a public confirmation that you'll come back onto the show down the line at some point?
This was wonderful. Happy to do that.
Also, I want to say a big thank you. And don't go away. I'm going to end the show, but there's just one little thing I wanted to ask you. So thank you, everyone, for watching. Please like and share. Sarah is on Twitter at Sarah Mushmush on Twitter. And check out LadiesCorner.com as well. We'd love to engage with you. So from the team, it's good night.